such an inspiring day. It's been wonderful to hear everybody. I'm from Wales. I know. One of my favorite words in Welsh is untranslatable. No, that's not the word. It's untranslatable in the same way as your koerselig, which I first learned in Holland as gezellig. And I understand the word to mean that warm, cozy, comfortable feeling you get with friends that can be applied to any situation, any social situation. The day has been gezellig for me, gezellig. But the word in Welsh, my favorite word in Welsh, is hiraeth. And the meaning, well, different people will tell you it means different things. For me, it means, it carries a nostalgia, a longing for the things past, for home. It's almost homesickness. A longing for the things that are lost, the things that have departed. The good old days, the good old ways. I've spent most of my career looking at the old ways of making theatre. I think of myself as a time traveler, like a ginger Doctor Who. One day there will be one. Looking at the old ways that we used to make theatre, to inspire the new. Looking at the way that we build theatres, what we used to, the way that companies used to work together, the way that we used to approach text, the way the audiences have changed. And not to be authentic. No one wants authenticity in these original practices. If we went back in time 400 years together and we went to the theatre together, you wouldn't like it. Half the people around you were dying of the plague. Their teeth were all rotting out. If you didn't like what I was doing as an actor, you'd throw food at me. Food was expensive. Not quite as expensive as here, but still. I remember the first time that I walked out onto an original practice space. It was at the reconstruction of the theatre that Shakespeare and his actors worked in for 20 years. It's on the south bank of the River Thames, the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. It's an outdoor theatre. They would have performed 400 years ago at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they would have been lit by the sun. They did have indoor theatres too. They were less common. And in fact, the Globe have just built one, and you can go to the theatre and experience what it is to watch a play by candlelight. It changes you. It changes the way that you breathe. It changes the way that you watch. It changes the way that you hold yourself. Standing in the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. You know, theatre has changed so much in the last 400 years. It's now a spectator sport. It's easy for you now. You can sit there in the darkness, be entertained, and I can't quite see you all. The lights are bright on my eyes. I can't see if you're happy or sad or enjoying yourself or not. It hasn't always been this way. In Shakespeare's theatre, they would have been in the same light, the light of the sun, a shared light. And what that means is that if I come out on stage and I'm playing Hamlet, and I make a joke, you're more likely to laugh. Because it feels like I'm talking to you, because I'm making eye contact with you, and you're making eye contact with me. And you're more likely to cry when I die. And laughing and crying, that's what going to the theater is. That's entertainment. Going on a journey together. Experiencing something together. And that word, together. Samen, ensemble in French. The name we give for Shakespeare's company. These band of men, and they were men because women weren't allowed to act on the stage, that worked together for 20 years, They've been described as Shakespeare's understanders as has never been seen before or since. I was fascinated by that idea, and I made a theatre company that worked in that way. We brought the same actors together again and again and again. The things we shared, I had wonderful friends and lost wonderful friends. Peter Brook, the theatre director, once said, if a group of people were to get together and devote themselves utterly to realizing the works of Shakespeare, what an extraordinary group of people that would be. Think about the company that Shakespeare kept for 20 years, the same people, every day, 300 days of the year. They would have known each other terribly well, wonderfully well. The reliance on each other. We adapted our company towards a modern climate. That's the point of original practices, not to be how it used to be, but to see how we can tune towards the modern, how we can take from the old to inspire the new. They were craftsmen. They worked with their hands. Literally, actually, because one day they turned up to the theatre and the gates were locked. The tenant, the landlord, they were tenants to a plot of land where their theatre was. And he decided to raise the rent. It was too much for them. So what did they do? They didn't give up. They went to the space at night, took the theatre apart, carried the wood across the river, found a new piece of land and built their own theatre with their own hands. They didn't approach their work as a job to be done, but a craft to be honed. And they made it themselves. They wouldn't be handed a copy of a play. They'd have to write it out themselves. The original practice of cue scripts. It can make you work terribly, terribly fast. A cue script, well, what is it? It's very like in music. If you're playing fourth violin in a 72-piece orchestra, you don't carry around all 72 parts. The other 71 parts are being taken care of by the other musicians. You carry out your part. The focus it gives you makes your work concise. It's the same with Shakespeare's company. You're playing Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet. You die halfway through the play. There's no point when you're writing out your lines to write out the second half of the play. You're dead. Someone else is looking after that. There's no point in writing out the scenes that you're not in. Someone else is looking after that. There's no point in writing out the speeches that you don't say in the scenes that you are in. You write out your cues of when to speak, your cues of when to enter and exit, and what you say. You learn it fast. They were said to have up to 40 plays in their heads at any one time. They would do a new play every single day. They'd perform at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They'd get the lines for the next play later that day. And some people think they would have learned a whole part overnight. Is that possible? Learn a whole part in 24 hours? Well, yeah, maybe if you're doing it every day. Daily practice changes your way of being. And their memories must have been muscular, inflated so well. And with little rehearsal time, I tell you, when you use cue script practice, it makes you listen. Because you literally don't know what the other person is going to say. When you work together regularly, you trust. You trust that the other person that you're working with is going to do right and going to do well. You start to learn how they're going to respond to a situation. You listen so keenly, not just to what they're going to say, but to how they're going to move and where they're going to move next to. They don't have time to plan it. They don't have time to rehearse like we do these days for 8 weeks. They respond in the moment. They listen to each other. We've forgotten how to listen that way. To listen to each other's body language. You listen differently too, because the actors spoke differently. The original practice of accent of pronunciation. You go online, you can go online later. Listen to some Shakespeare. Shakespeare for the last 100 years has been spoken in the right accent, the accent of the BBC, of received pronunciation. To be or not to be, that is the question. It's so different from how Shakespeare used to sound, and we can work it out pretty close. They used to spell a lot more like they used to speak, so we go back to the old texts. There are accounts at the time of what the accent sounded like. And some of Shakespeare's rhymes, he worked so much in rhyme, the rhymes don't work so well anymore, so we know that the accent must have changed. We know that the accent must have sounded more like to bear or not to bear. That is the question. New is the winter of her discontent, made glorious summer by this sun o' Yark. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou'rt more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds to shape the darling buds o' May, and summer's lass hath all too short a date. That accent of Elizabethan London, of Shakespeare's London, spread around the world. And it's the great, 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 great grandmother of pretty much every English accent today. So the right accent for speaking Shakespeare is your accent, if you want to speak it. Shakespeare's craft, it came to rhythm. There was so much music in Shakespeare. Marlowe, the man that was Shakespeare before Shakespeare, he came up with this great idea. There was a type of poetry that has a particular type of rhythm in it. It's a rhythm that we all speak. We still speak today when we speak English. The dum, the dum, the dum, the dum, the dum rhythm. I dropped my phone and cracked the screen today. Da 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 da. You carry that rhythm with you every day. Put your hand on your heart. Do it now. Feel it. Da 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 da. It's a human sounding rhythm. And Marlowe realized that if he gave his characters this rhythm in their speeches, then they would sound more heightened because they're speaking in poetry, but they would sound more natural. So the rhythm of Marlowe's speeches go da-dum, 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 and on and on and on. And Shakespeare, well, he took this idea and he ran with it. His speeches would go da-dum, 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 da-dee-dee, dum, da-dum, da-dum, and everyone would go, oh, what was the dee-dee? Because he knew, you know, well, when we speak, we stop, we start, we're not fluent, we hesitate, we pause. And he realized that if he manipulated this rhythm, then his characters would sound even more human while still sounding heightened, because they were still speaking in poetry. And you get to halfway through his career, and the rhythm of his speeches goes da-dum, 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 da-dee, da-dum, da-dee, da-dum, 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 dee, dee, da-dum, 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 da-dee-dee, da-dum, da-dee-dee, da-dee-dee, da-dum, da-dee-dee, da-dee-dee, da-da. He played jazz with this rhythm. He manipulated it to simulate the heartbeat of his characters as he made the rhythm fluctuate. It tallied with the emotional heart of the characters that were speaking. And his actors, they pick up on this. Every single nuance. It was their job. We don't. You can't see this on the page. You have to lift up the hood. You have to look at the mechanics underneath. We don't have this daily practice. The jazz mechanics of Shakespeare's craft. He was a craftsman. He's called a playwright. We spell that word W-R-I-G-H-T. You know the other place we find that word? Shipwright. Think about the craft that goes into making a ship. The time, the science. You wanted to be a craftsman in Shakespeare's time? You had to be an apprentice to a craftsman. You wanted to be an apprentice? You had to make your own tools. Shakespeare's tool was the quill. You want to make a quill? You have to find a swan and pluck a feather. The swans are mean. After you've run away, you sharpen that quill. You get some ink. Find some paper. Paper's expensive too. And you go dip, dip, dip. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Dip, dip, dip. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Dip, dip, dip. Scratch, scratch, scratch. And you have to be or not. It's hard. It's a craft that is honed. He crafted heart into word. And not words to be studied. Words to be learned by heart. Words to be spoken. Words to be heard. Words to be shared. Ideas to be shared. The old ways and the old days, they may not be the best ones, but they can teach us and they can inspire us for the new and for the future. Thank you.